Tom Brady. We played that clip from his podcast, Let's Go, for a couple of reasons. One of which is I listened to the entire thing, all 59 minutes. I wanted to see on Brady's homegrown platform where he and Jim Gray go back and forth on issues regarding the team and the league and, every week. Well, the biggest story in the league right now, at least as of when that was recorded and as it relates to the Buccaneers particularly, is the fake vaccination card scandal in Tampa. 3 guys had shown up with fake cards. 2 of them were still on the team. They're suspended 3 games each. They've served 1 game in the suspension, and one of them is Antonio Brown, a guy that Tom Brady had to have. And there's a question as to whether or not the Buccaneers are going to bring him back when the suspension ends. They could cut him. Seems to be a relevant topic. Seems to be a topic of interest. Not mentioned in any way, shape, or form. Not even to reiterate the kind of canned answer that he had on Sunday when he was asked about it at the post-game press conference after they beat the Falcons. He said, I focus on my job, and guys get injured, guys aren't available for a bunch of different reasons. I can't worry about that. I have to focus on my job. At least repeat that. But it was very odd to me, Myles, that a full hour went by without Tom Brady offering any comment on what is one of the biggest stories in the NFL right now. And a shocking situation where it's possible that the Buccaneers are being treated unfairly because there's no way that there's no other fake vaccination cards and the NFL isn't inclined to go find them.
Did you listen to that one on full speed, or did you speed it up to double time, 1.5 time, because you wanted to actually be a little more efficient with it? Because I honestly kind of feel like you might deserve a gold star for sitting through 59 minutes of that podcast just to listen for that.
I don't know how to speed it up, or I would.
Oh, Mike, I got to teach you. That's okay.
Yeah. I don't know that I would like that. Look, I like to have something on while I work, like background noise, and it was either that or Sports Center or the news or whatever, and it's I'll listen. I was curious. And actually, the guest they had on, Sadhguru, I think is his name, that guy had some nuggets that were very inspiring and helpful to me. So it was worth the hour that I put into it. I went there looking for information about Antonio Brown, and I found enlightenment, but not enough to get me to shut up about either my criticism of Tom Brady's cowardly failure to talk about Antonio Brown, or his personal grooming habits. I wasn't that sufficiently enlightened.
I guess not. Look, I don't really know why you expected him to be able to, or not to be able to, but just to address in general the Antonio Brown situation. I don't, because when he's on his own platform, then he's only going to talk about the stuff he wants to talk about, right? And that's pretty clearly something based on the answer he gave in the post-game press conference the other day that he just doesn't really want to talk about. And furthermore, I think it might be something that he and Bruce Arians and maybe the PR staff or whatever it is, they've all kind of come together and said, listen, we're not necessarily going to try to address this publicly, other than what Bruce Arians said at the beginning of his press conference last week, where he was yeah, I'm not talking about this. And then, we had to bleep him because he said there's more important stuff going on than that, right? So I think that, when you talk about Brady and what his own platform is, of course, he's not really going to talk about this, because this is something that, frankly, he could get criticized for. And Tom Brady, because it was really him that was pushing Antonio Brown to get to this team in the first place. And then Tom Brady let Antonio Brown stay at his house for a period of time when Antonio Brown was trying to get acclimated to the Buccaneers. So I'm not surprised at all that he didn't really want to say anything very public about Antonio Brown at this point, because what are you going to say that is going to at least be positive in the discourse of the public when it's somebody that's literally faking a vaccine card, which technically is a federal offense?
Right. And I understand what you're saying. I guess the reason that I wanted to discuss this in this format and wrote about it at PFT, we're kind of gradually becoming numb to the idea that the people who are the subject of interest in the sports world are creating their own platforms for delivering their truth, their preferred version of the truth, which allows them to avoid the topics that they'd rather not discuss. And there's a certain irony to the fact that Jim Gray, who once immolated Pete Rose on national TV at a time when many thought it was inappropriate for him to go after him the way he did. He's just throwing up softballs, and he didn't even throw up a softball on this question of the Antonio Brown situation. It was forbidden. It was not coming up. And I just hope that the audience is astute enough and willing to say, you know what, we got a lot of choices out there. We got a lot of different things we can spend our time on. And we're going to be very judicious about subscribing to and listening to a podcast where we're getting whatever the guy feels like telling us about, and he's not going to delve into the issues that he should be talking about that are particularly relevant to his team, because when he does it that way, he's less likely to appear on other platforms where he may be asked a question that presses him a little bit, that forces him to address the issue. So between his podcast and between twice per week press conferences with a group of reporters who are going to tiptoe on eggshells to a certain extent because that's their beat. That's what they do. They don't want to piss off the people that they cover all the time. And I understand, I'm not being critical, but you're never going to get Tom Brady in a setting where somebody's going to ask him questions that are even 2% of the intensity of the questions that Jim Gray posed to Pete Rose all those years ago. And that's unfortunate because sometimes you need robust and aggressive and fair and respectful questioning, not like what we saw the other night with the Bills game when they asked the players if they were embarrassed by their performance. There's a way to ask pointed questions that get to the truth, that provide balanced coverage, and that draw out more information about things we're interested in. And frankly, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop right there. I don't want to dig the hole any deeper than I'm trying. I think that we need to be very diligent at this juncture in our coverage of sports where Aaron Rodgers can go to a friendly environment every Tuesday and say whatever he wants. Now, in a roundabout way, that's actually good for us because he's so comfortable in that environment, he says things that he shouldn't. Tom Brady's not quite there yet. He's not so comfortable with Jim Gray that he completely lets his guard down and airs grievances and creates content that we can say, I can't believe he said it. So, Aaron Rodgers, we appreciate what you're doing, but generally, I just don't like the practice of the people that we're interested in hearing from being the ones who produce the content where they're the subject of it, because you're never going to get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth that way. That's my position on it, and I'm going to shut up now.
Well, right. No, I think what you're saying makes total sense, but I also think that, this is sort of the environment that we live in at this point, and it's only going to continue. I mean, frankly, look, I used to.
But we don't have to just accept it, Myles. We don't have to say.
Well,
we don't have to just say that's it. We just have to deal with it. We can still say we don't like it. I don't like it. I understand
absolutely.
We have to deal with it. I don't like it.
No, right. But I don't think that that's going to change it in any way, because this is where the business is going, right? We have players who want the friendliest media personality possible to ask them questions that are softballs. And so then we kind of need the press conferences and the other media access in order to have reporters that are real journalists, right, actually asking these players questions. It's one of the issues that has come up now with not having real locker room access or not having any access to players beyond press conferences. Because when you're in the locker room and you can have a side conversation with somebody, that's how you start to establish and build trust with players. And that's how you can go into a locker room and then you ask a more critical question after a game, because the player's going to know, hey, man, like this person is just trying to get at the truth. They're not just trying to embarrass me. And this is just kind of what the cycle is right now in our COVID environment. But I think, furthermore beyond that, just like taking a bigger picture view of it, right? Like I worked for the Los Angeles Rams and for the Carolina Panthers covering those teams. And for a lot of people, it's very hard to not just work for a team and then write about the team, but you can't always be critical of what those teams are doing when you're writing for the team. It's the same conversation that we were having, via text about a different reporter earlier today, right? Where if you're covering the league for the league, you can't do the same things that you would be doing if you're working for a place, a different media outlet. So I understand why Tom Brady's doing what he's doing. I understand your perspective of what you're saying. And I agree with you that we need to be able to have reporters journalists, right? And I would just frankly say that I was not really a journalist while I was working for those teams, right? Like, I mean, we can say whatever we want. Like, maybe I was a reporter, maybe I wasn't. But if you're being paid by the entity that you are covering, you're not really a journalist. So I'm a journalist now, and I guess I was when I worked for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. But I like, there is a huge and clear difference there, and that's why it's more important to have more access, so we really do have an opportunity to get at what is the truth.
Thanks. And we had that conversation earlier today via text regarding Mike Silver, some comments he had on Tim Kawakami's podcast. And I'm going to write something about it at PFT. And this isn't an attack on Silver per se. This is an attack on, and it's not really an attack. It's a comment on what happened when it's just, it's the reality we operate in now when leagues and teams offer employment to reporters and those reporters accept the employment. Because frankly, and look, Myles, again, I don't know what label to apply to somebody who takes a paycheck from Stan Kroenke to cover the Rams, takes a paycheck from David Tepper to cover the Panthers, or from any of the owners of the teams to cover the teams. I don't know what that is. And it's the same situation when you take a check that is signed literally by Roger Goodell to cover the NFL. And Silver made a great point, and he talked about how within the walls of the National Football League during the Ray Rice scandal, there was a sense that this could bring the whole house down. Now, that doesn't mean the NFL ceases to exist. It means everybody's gone in leadership. New commissioner, new everything, complete turnover of the upper reaches, and then it trickles down as other people come and go. And he said that when you're on the air then talking about Ray Rice, it's the equivalent of working for Procter & Gamble, appearing on Procter & Gamble TV, live from Procter & Gamble studios, talking about a major corporate scandal that threatens to take out the leadership of Procter & Gamble. And once you take that job, that's what you're signing up for. And this is similar. I mean, people may say, what the hell? Why does this matter? This is all part of who it is that's giving you their opinions, their takes, the reporting, the stories that you can and can't talk about, the things that I say that sometimes piss off the league. If I worked for the league, I couldn't say those things. And Silver's attitude was, well, if I'm going to go work for the league, I have to dial it back some. Well, you don't have to go work for the league. That's your solution. If you want to be true to who you are, and fundamentally what this is about is authenticity, originality, and truth. I guess that's why I'm banging this drum. And people can say, well, it's easy for you to say it because you don't have to go find a job. And that's true. I don't have to go find a job. I own my platform. I built my platform. I don't have to worry about how am I going to pay my bills or put my kid through school or whatever the case may be. It's a tough choice when the job's out there. But, the reality is once you take that job, you're no longer a journalist. I don't know what you are at that point. And it was interesting to hear Mike Silver talk about it. It dovetails back to this Tom Brady thing. He's setting the agenda. He's deciding what he's going to talk about. And Jim Gray is not going to ask him about anything that he tells Jim ahead of time. I don't want to talk about this. And I suspect there was a conversation between Gray and Brady. We're not talking about the fake vaccination cards.
Well, sometimes you don't even need that conversation, right? I mean, from my experience in working for teams, there's just sometimes you have to know what you are and are not going to address in certain situations. And, I was saying this to you earlier, Mike, like I had a pretty long leash with the Rams, but that doesn't mean that there weren't subjects that I knew I really shouldn't touch. 2016, for example, right? You have a lot of reporters who were saying, hey, man, is this the end of Jeff Fisher's tenure with the Rams? What are they going to be able to do with that? And as the team reporter, you're not going to say that. You're just not, because if you do, then you're jeopardizing your own job and your own paycheck. And, at that point, I was like 25 or so years old. I couldn't just go out there and, find another job. It's not that easy. As they said in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I'm not going to do shake the job tree and just find a lot of jobbies out there. That's not necessarily the way things work. So you say, well, what do we call these people? I don't know. They called me senior writer / team insider with the Rams. And maybe that's just what we need to call these people. League insiders, insider, like team insider. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Like all of this stuff is interconnected because, it's not even, oh, won't someone rid me of this meddlesome priest? You just, what you can and can't address a lot of times in these situations.
You could call them PR staff as well. I mean, frankly. Frankly,
yeah, I mean, I wasn't in the PR
it's glorified.
department.
It's glorified PR,
No, it is.
but it is. If you're gonna limit in any way what you say or what you write, and you just know that goes with the territory, it's kind of the unspoken, unwritten rule of working there. You're kind of an extension of the PR department. And again, there's no law against teams and leagues creating and disseminating their own content. But here's what happens. When the leagues and the teams become accustomed to being covered by people who will not speak the hard truths and ask the tough questions, they get even more pissed off when someone does. It makes it harder for the people who are independent like us to try to get to the truth because they're spoiled by the fact that they own the media that covers them. And hey, look, when you work for a broadcast partner, it's not always easy, and you got to be ready to get a little pushback. And I give NBC a mountain of credit for dealing with the complaints that come from time to time, and they do. And sometimes, the third rail is there, and I see it, and I know it's there, and I jump on it. Sometimes I trip over it and don't even realize I did. It's far more gratifying when I intend to do it, but it happens, and it's going to keep happening because I'm not going to deprive the entity that I regard as my primary client, the audience, from what the truth is and what I believe the truth to be and what it should be. And it's all part of a goal, too, to make the NFL better. People say, why do you hate the NFL? I don't hate the NFL. I'm trying to make the NFL better. I'm trying to make it an entity that does the right thing all the time, that treats its players the right way all the time, that treats its employees the right way all the time, that is truly, truly focused on the integrity of the game and not creating the impression that it's focused on the integrity of the game, that's willing to spend the money necessary to make the game as good as it can be so we all can enjoy it, so we don't have these issues. Now, frankly, if they did everything I wanted them to do, I don't know what the hell I would talk about. So I guess thank you for not doing these things, right? But that's the goal. And when you're on the payroll, you can't have that kind of a voice.
No, you're right. Yes. But I think the difference in like what you can do and the way you can do things and other folks, like including, frankly, myself, is like you said, you own the platform, right? Not a lot of us have that luxury. And, it's just something that some of us have to deal with, right? We have to be able to pay our rent and send kids to school and do all those other things you were mentioning earlier. And I think that that is kind of the primary difference between what you say and what you do and how much that you listen. I'll say this too. Nobody could love the league, nobody could not love the league and not love football and do what you do every day. You know what I mean, Mike? Jesus, you're up every morning talking for 2 hours about football, and you write about football all day, and you do take a nap, but then you come back on the air and then you talk football for another hour. And then you work all weekend. I just have not known you to take much of a day off, and I've been working here for now over a year. So obviously you love football, but there's a difference between what you can do and what others can do in terms of covering the league, and especially if you are working for the league or for a team and covering the league or that team.
And I guess to bring it back home, and we've completely destroyed our outline for today, but that's fine.
Yeah, we have.
We own the platform. We can talk about whatever we want. But to bring it back home, the more that we see teams, leagues, and individual players create and control the content, the harder it is for those of us. And this is my message to the audience. They're making it harder for us to tell you the truth, because they're never going to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're going to tell you their preferred version of the truth they want you to buy. That's my entire point in raising what was fairly obvious. Tom Brady's not going to talk about Antonio Brown. Well, why didn't he? Why shouldn't he? And how does that impact you, the audience, in your effort to get to the truth? And
how does it also impact the Tampa Bay? Well, you may be dumb. I'll say this one thing too. How does it also impact the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the rest of the league as a whole if we don't have Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times going and doing the actual journalism, the actual reporting here for this story that then broke with Antonio Brown, and not just Antonio Brown, but 2 other players having fake vaccine cards? That's why it's important to not just have the league entity, the team entity covering exactly what the team is, right? Because if we don't have that kind of independent journalism, this is not necessarily just for sports, this is for society as a whole. We don't have that, the truth seekers and the truth finders then there's something that's going to be lacking, not just from the NFL and from different teams and all that, but from society as a whole. So now I guess we can move on, Mike.
Well, you make an excellent point, and I want to applaud Rick Stroud for his efforts to get to the truth, because I suspect he took a lot of crap from the Buccaneers after he reported that story. And I suspect he's had a hard time getting people on the phone from the team that he covers because he reported that story. And he was right. And if I look at it this way, if somebody who works for Buccaneers.com had been approached by Steven Ruiz with his story about Antonio Brown having a fake vaccination card, I don't think it would have been pursued. I don't think Ruiz would have been interviewed. I don't think there would have been a story at Buccaneers.com where Ruiz alleges that Antonio Brown had a fake vaccination card. And that's the fundamental difference between media that is bought and paid for by the entity that the media covers and truly independent media. And it did have an impact on the Buccaneers. Antonio Brown would currently be able to play. Mike Edwards would be able to play. The NFL wouldn't have had to deal with this if they just simply hadn't reported it in the Tampa Bay Times. And that's why it's important to have independent sources of information, or the truth does get buried every time. It's inconvenient for those within the NFL bubble that would rather it be not available for us to see.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.